This is your afternoon tropical update for the Eastern Pacific and North Atlantic on this Tuesday, June 21st. Here are the latest official stats on Tropical Storm Beatrice now. This is the latest update from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. As you can see, Beatrice has not only begun moving away from coastal Mexico, but it has also weakened now to a tropical storm, and significant weakening below tropical depression status is more than likely over the next 24 hours. The official forecast does keep this as a tropical storm through early Thursday, but chances are, based on the latest trends, it will weaken even faster than that. And the good news is that the storm will now continue moving toward the west and out to sea. During the early morning hours, the inner core of Hurricane Beatrice made a very good scrape of the Mexican coast, and in fact, it looks like the eye wall actually penetrated the coastal areas quite a bit. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of surface observations in that region to confirm just how strong the sustained winds were, but chances are they were sustained or at least gusting to Category 1 in areas all around Manzanillo. And over the last few hours, luckily, the storm has now begun to move away. And before that began to occur, it looks like the terrain of western Mexico has really taken a beating on this storm. And not only that, but we also have some dry air and some cooler sea surface temperatures now where this storm is moving. So Beatrice is going to fade away fairly quickly, which is certainly a good thing because the residents along these coastal regions of Mexico cannot afford any additional rainfall from the system, especially in areas of higher terrain where mudslides are a much bigger concern. This is a look at the latest visible, and I would not be surprised if the low-level circulation of Beatrice becomes detached from the mid to upper level half of the storm. As you can see, a lot of convection is now drifting off into interior portions of the country, while the low-level center begins to move more toward the west. Here's the latest look at the water vapor imagery. We still have a nice outflow channel to the north, but that's being enhanced by some unfavorable westerly winds, and our low-level circulation will more than likely detach as some of these upper-level convective features continue moving off toward the north. Another bit of good news is that the rest of the East Pacific Basin is quiet today with no organized disturbances to really mention, so we will get a nice break for at least the next few days as Beatrice begins to dissipate. The good news continues in the Atlantic Basin, where the entire Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf is clear of any significant tropical weather. The other bit of positive news is that the weak tropical wave that made it into the central Gulf of Mexico has helped to enhance some of the moisture along the central Gulf Coast, and that is an area that is really craving some much needed rainfall, and sure enough, we do see a lot of convective development out there today, so hopefully areas can get some much needed rain. And it's also being enhanced by a incoming trough over the central United States. It's the same trough that produced all that severe weather in over 40 to 50 tornado reports yesterday, and that's acting to cause some enhanced lift near the surface, which is really firing up all that convective activity up there. But that is really nothing that's going to be a threat in terms of moving its way into the Gulf and possibly doing anything tropical. So no worries in the imminent future. And as you can see, much of the basin is being dominated by upper-level lows that you see here and a lot of upper-level troughs. So this is a really unfavorable pattern at the moment. The net result when you get a lot of westerlies in association with those upper-level troughs and lows is a lot of wind shear. This is a lot of 30 to 50 knot vertical wind shear over much of the deep tropics, so we won't be getting any development in the near future. All that being said, we still have a favorable enhancing pulse of the Madden-Julian oscillation working its way through the basin from west to east, and it looks like it's going to be over the Gulf and Caribbean for at least the next 3 to 5 additional days. And beyond that, it's really hard to time these MJO patterns, but we'll just have to wait and see on what happens thereafter. But for the next week or so, the main threat or area to look for will be in the western Caribbean or Gulf, where that monsoonal trough remains a little bit more active than normal. A look at this afternoon's model guidance verifies the same general theory that the Atlantic will be quiet for the next 6 to 7 days, but if anything, we will be having to watch near the Yucatan Peninsula, including the southern Gulf of Mexico and western Caribbean, as some of the models do want to pick up on the development of a tropical disturbance exiting the intertropical convergence zone, beginning in the southeast Caribbean in 3 to 5 days and working its way westward toward the southern Gulf of Mexico, where it begins to amplify just a little bit. but really no indications of actual tropical cyclone formation in these models just yet. Anyway, if we move on, this is the 12Z Canadian forecast, and this is now 72 hours, still nothing there, but toward the end of the run, you begin to see a little flare-up in the low-level vorticity as a tropical disturbance begins to approach much of Central America as it begins to continue working its way toward the Bay of Campeche. The latest GFS is in fairly good agreement with that idea as well. If we noticed, in the middle of this run, we also begin to see the same thing with the tropical disturbance lifting north in the central and western Caribbean. And by days 6 and 7, we begin to see a little flare-up in activity in the Bay of Campeche and Southwest Gulf. Now, for the latest 12Z no-gaps forecast, I'll switch over to the latest sea level pressure forecast pattern, because this model actually does want to develop this feature into a tropical cyclone. But before anyone gets overly concerned, one consistent problem with the no-gaps is that it has the tendency to lower the surface pressures way too much, especially in this part of the globe in the Western Caribbean. For whatever reason, the model just tends to overdevelop systems in that area. But the model nonetheless is picking up on the same system, and by day 5 we begin to see some true indications of development, and by day 6 we have at the very least a strong wave showing signs of organization as it begins to approach Cozumel and Cancun. But again, this is 6 days out, and this is probably the least reliable dynamical model that we have in our disposal. The 12Z European is also picking up on this. This is the day 5 850 millibar vorticity forecast, and the tropical disturbance that we're talking about is just to the east of Belize based on this model run, and by day 6 it's continuing to move west and getting close to the Bay of Campeche, and by day 7 it's pretty much sitting down there. And if this run were to verify, it might actually be a bit too close to land and there would be too much land interaction involved. But if this were to drift a little bit more toward the north into the central Gulf, then perhaps we would have something to at least monitor. So that is your tropical update for today. Hopefully we get at least 3 to 5 days of a break after Hurricane Beatrice made a landfall in southwest Mexico. Sure enough, we're going to need one before the hurricane season really begins to get going. This is a fairly normal pattern for June not to produce much in the way of activity, at least in the Atlantic, but that does not mean that the rest of the season won't be well above average and possibly very extreme. Usually the bulk majority of your activity occurs in August, September, and October, so we have a long way to go, and we're just getting started here at 28storms.com. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll have another video by tomorrow.